The next level, what happens, or on the next level, what happens it's on the brain level. There's a ball of energy forming. You can see the ball of energy as kind of like an onion with many different rings, but really look at it as a ball, not a target like a 2D image, but really a 3D image. It's an impact point in the brain, which kind of this ring-like formations if you make certain types of scans or certain type of imagery from that. It's a sphere that is visible in multiple cuts of a brain CT. I'm going to show you an image in a minute. And the actual location of the impact point in the brain corresponds with what tissue starts reacting. So on a brain level, we can take a look at the CT, we can analyze a CT, stress analysis, and see what type of tissues the body is reacting with. But really see it as a sphere, not as a 2D image, as a really 3D image. So let's take a look at the brain. And in this brain, I drew in this ball of energy. On the right side of the image, you see the front part of the brain, and on the left side of the image with the cauliflower at the bottom, you see the back of the brain. So this point, this blue point, is drawn in the back of the brain. So when we take a image of the brain, and this is a typical CT type of image, that actually slices the brain in many different slices. It usually starts at the bottom and then makes many different slices like the blue line all the way to the top of the brain. And if you take a look at one slice, it might look something like this. And as you see in the brain on the left side of the image, the cut or the image is below the actual sphere, the actual impact point. So we don't see an impact point on the image, right? Now we take the next slice, next image. And I see an impact point on the right side of the screen, all the way on the bottom left of the brain slice. And it looks a little bit similar like a target, like a practice target with shooting arrows, archery, or shooting guns or something like that. It's a ring-like formation. Because remember the onion? When you cut down the onion in the middle, you see all those rings, right? That's also when you make an image of the brain cut, you see the same thing. And this particular point corresponds to the ankle of the right foot. We're not going in there too much detail right now. We're just explaining what the impact point in the brain looks like and how it can be viewed, right? So the next level of the brain, it's a little bit cut higher. And if you look carefully on the left side of the image, you see that the second cut is a smaller piece of the onion, a smaller piece of the entire sphere than the third cut, right? So the third cut is right through the middle of the impact point, and the second cut is something somewhere below. That also corresponds, you can see that in the next level of the CT image, because now the ring-like formation is larger. So let's go back one. See, it's smaller here, and it's also smaller on the right side of this screen. So the cut compared to the lower part of the sphere in the whole brain. So now we go up one level, a higher cut. The ring is larger, but also the cut is more in the middle of the sphere. A next cut might be here, and then nothing can be seen again, right? So this impact point is visible in multiple layers of a brain CT. That's also how you can verify that if you are in that area, that you verify that's not an artifact or a mistake of the machine, because the same impact point can be seen on many different levels, on many different brain cuts. So that's what you can see on the brain level. On the organ, or actually on the tissue level, you see also a similar kind of ring formation, like in the brain, but also the biological adaptation depending on the type of tissue. And there are basically two types of tissues. Either it's a plus tissue or a minus tissue. A plus tissue means that it is creating more cells or more activity in that adaptation phase, and a minus cell is creating less activity or less function in the adaptation phase. So thinking of that and working towards that, there's only two types of symptoms. About a couple of hundred symptoms that are in the anatomy books or in the pathology books. There are actually two. You can divide them all into two types. Either it's more cells or more function, or it's less cells or less function. For example, a tumor is more cells or more function, and a diabetes is less insulin, so it's a less cell function. The symptoms that we here now talk about as more cells or less cells are the symptoms that show themselves in the adaptation phase. We're only talking about the adaptation phase right now. The other phases come later, only the adaptation phase. So we have two types of symptoms, either a symptom that is geared or that shows itself because there's more function or more cells, or a symptom that shows itself because there are less cells or less function. More cells or less cells. There are a few different types of tissues that fall in these types of categories, and we will go into more detail of those tissues, but at least you have a little bit of an overview. And it created metaphors out of these tissue types because metaphors are easier to remember. The first metaphor is a sponge. And the sponge is a really ancient animal. Yes, it is an animal. And the only function that it actually does is eating and excreting, right? Eating and shitting. That's actually the only function that a sponge type of animal does. Then we have a turtle animal, and a turtle is characterized by its hard protective layer of skin, its hard shell. And the turtle lives in the water and on the land. And the jellyfish is kind of an unconscious motor movement. So it has digestion, taking stuff in and shitting things out, but it also has some flexible motor movement. So if you look at the development of tissues, you can see that the sponge was first. Digestion needs to be there first. Then there's the jellyfish, because after we digest things, we need to move things. And it's kind of the unconscious movement. And after the jellyfish, there's the turtle that needs to protect itself from the outside. Like a jellyfish doesn't really have this much external influence, like external sharp edges. But because the turtle is also living on the land, the turtle does. So the turtle needs to protect itself. So the sponge, the jelly, and the turtle all belong to the tissue types of cell plus. In the adaptation phase, they all create cell plus. Tissue types that belong to the cell minus is like the bear type of tissues and the chimp type of tissues. So the evolution continues from the turtle towards the bear. The turtle lives on the land, moves in the sea and on the land. And the bear needs to have more muscle movement to move around more. So that's why the bear has these strong muscles. And the chimp is the next evolution, and the chimp is actually a really social animal, really connecting with people. And the social part really comes into the chimp type of tissues. The bear type of tissues really come into the muscle movement, the strong muscle movement, the power, bones, and muscles. The bear and the chimp belong to the tissue type of cell minus, meaning that in the adaptation phase, they have less function or less cells. So for example, what we talked about as in the diabetes as a cell minus symptom, and the diabetes belongs to the chimp tissue type. Okay. One way to remember this also easy is if you look at the evolution, is we have the sponge that lives at the bottom of the sea, the jellyfish that lives in the middle of the sea, between the bottom and the top. The turtle lives from the sea into the land. The bear lives on the land, and the chimps lives on the land and in the trees. And these metaphors will come over and over and over again. But for now, this is an introduction. So the assignment. Find 3 symptoms online that are an example of a more cell function. So what is a symptom that is a symptom because there's more function, the body does something more, or there's more cells, there's something growing? Doesn't have to be bad, just a symptom. And find the 3 symptoms that are an example of a less cell or a less function. So the body does something less than normal, or there are less cells than normal, right? This is, I must say, this is an intensive exercise, even though it looks simple, but this is actually the core of what you need to know and what really propels your knowledge humongous forwards. So really spend some time on this to really start researching what are some symptoms that are a more cell function symptom and what are some symptoms that are a less cell function symptom. And I estimated 30 minutes for this, but it might take you much longer. And really take this exercise serious because it really will help you.
Did you like it? Just give it a thumbs up and comment what you liked it so it can inspire other people too.